the Belated Binge podcast.
Hi, and welcome to Belated Binge, the podcast that doesn't take itself or the show too seriously. My name's Zach, and I'm your host, here to let you relive your favorite series that I nearly missed out on, like How I Met Your Father, which I wasn't as late as I normally am to, and to be honest, it felt kind of appropriate still for the podcast because I hadn't watched its predecessor until it was like 10 years after the finale. However, this show was canceled like a year and a half ago, so we're still late, but we're not crazy late. I also might be using the term your favorite series a little bit loosely on this one. But before we dig into it, shout out to the Bonish Binge Squad on Patreon. And I think I might have just said Bonish Binge Squad, which feels like the way that I should say that from now on. And I think I'm going to do that. Now, if you're unfamiliar, back in the year of our Lord 2022, Hulu launched a streaming series called How I Met Your Father. And if your first thought after hearing that sentence is, hey, Zach, didn't you just say that you just finished How I Met Your Mother for the first time? The answer is yes. Yes, I did. And you can listen to that episode again if you missed it or you need a refresher. But then after watching How I Met Your Mother, I guess I just wanted some more from this particular universe. And I had heard that How I Met Your Father existed. And so I decided to give it a go. And that show takes place basically in the time that it was made, but to keep in line with its predecessor, the way they set it up was that the main character, Sophie, in the future, like 2050, is on a call with her son who's away at college, telling him the story of, you guessed it, how she met his father. Then the events of the 2020s version of Sophie serve as the main show. And they basically do a replay of some of the hits from How I Met Your Mother, along with that particular narrative style, right? Sophie is the Ted who's telling and reliving the story of how she's a hopeless romantic navigating being single in New York City. She has her group of friends. They do silly stuff. They hang out at the same bar every night. And of course, there's also a friend group of, hookups across the friend group, I guess you could say. Drama of relationships in and outside of the friend group and all that familiar yada yada that we got used to in How I Met Your Mother. There's the engaged and then married couple, Sid and Hannah, who are navigating a long-distance relationship. There's the silly, naive friend, Charlie, who's a trust fund baby who ran away from his family's money to be with Sophie's best friend, Val. That's her name, in New York. But of course, that doesn't go as planned. Big shocker. There's the wacky lesbian Ellen, who's the adopted sister who came to New York City to reconnect with her long-lost brother Jesse, who is the main will they, won't they, on-again, off-again type of love interest for Sophie. And I think you're probably starting to sense the familiar feel that they were trying to go for when they made this show. Are they a direct one-to-one of How I Met Your Mother characters? No, but again, some of the hits are there. Val and Charlie fall apart because Charlie doesn't want to have kids and Val does. Very Ted and Robin. Sid and Hannah are the cutesy perfect couple for the most part, a la Marshall and Lily. Yet they also have to deal with the long distance of it all and where will they live because her dreams of being a surgeon in LA and his of owning a bar in New York. Again, are we sounding semi-familiar with their trope, if you will? Charlie is kind of a funky blend of Marshall and Barney, where he's super naive and silly, surprisingly sensitive, and kind of the things that make Marshall lovable, all the while being super hot and capable of sleeping with just about any woman in New York, a la Barney, but not gross, like Barney. If anyone actually is the Barney, the closest equivalent, I guess, would be Val, who is kind of the single hot girl who's afraid of commitment and runs through several dudes on the show and has some problematic traits while doing so, but unlike Barney, isn't completely over the top about it and has that like love for Charlie going throughout the series to keep her more grounded. The thing that Barney didn't develop until much, much later in the series is ever present for Val in this one. Kind of like seemingly a bit of a course correction on that type of character for the climate that it was made in, I guess. Ellen isn't really the Robin of the group, but is the new one that isn't there for a love interest and sort of becomes friends with everyone anyways. And of course, Sophie and Jesse do the will they, won't they dance of Ted and Robin literally the whole time, even down to the part where when they first do get together the first time, Jesse says, "I love you" too fast. The twist here is that he says it in his sleep after they actually sleep together for the first time. So while it's, again, not a one-to-one rehash of everything How I Met Your Mother, they definitely tried to draw from the original show in a lot of ways, and not just the characters. Like, they used an updated version of the old intro song. They used that photo montage style of intro to go along with it. And that was actually tied into the show this time pretty well, really, because Sophie is a photographer in the show. They're all the same. They're all in the same part of New York City during the same time of their lives, with a basically same size friend group going through a lot of the same type of life events. They even give us like callbacks and cameos throughout, honestly, whether they were earned or warranted or not. 2 callbacks in particular, I think were really, really good. The first one is that Sid and Jesse are roommates, a la Ted and Marshall. And it's established immediately that they have the OG apartment from How I Met Your Mother. There's a sly mention of this really cool old couple that they got it from without actually saying their names. And we, as the audience, get to think, oh my gosh, that's Marshall and Lily. They even left the swords on the wall and like called them out as like this really cool feature. Like, hey, they even left their swords behind. Like, again, that's a really great callback that they did. The other cool callback that they had was McLaren's. It's not the bar that the friend group actually hangs out in, which I guess maybe would have been too much, but maybe it wouldn't have been. But there is an episode where Sophie goes downstairs from the guy's apartment and mentions it, and of course has a line something like, I wonder why we never hung out down here or whatever, but it's a cool way to pay homage or homage, or however you actually say that word, to the OG show without beating us over the head with it. Unfortunately, that particular callback comes as part of one of the unearned and forced in cameos that absolutely do beat us over the head with it. And it didn't have to be that way. But alas, here's how it basically goes down. Sophie first runs into Carl, the bartender from How I Met Your Mother, which would have honestly been a fantastic cameo. And then about 5 seconds later, Robin, the real cameo, makes her appearance. And this is where it starts to get super forced. Sophie is apparently a super fan of Robin's. Robin still gets all extra cocky when someone has ever actually heard of her. And for some reason, she asks Sophie about her boy troubles, which just so happens to be the morning after Jesse said, "I love you" in his sleep. So, of course, Robin is there to be able to give sage advice about why she shouldn't run away from a guy for just saying "I love you" too fast, like she did. And I think it's worth noting, when you peel back some of the layers, that in the peeling back of those layers, unfortunately, actually took me out of the show a little bit thinking about it. But this would have taken place during the How I Met Your Mother canon when Ted and Robin were not together. I believe the show canon would have had this scene taking place in like 2020, which is 4 years before Ted's wife passes away. Now, I don't know that we know, or at least I don't know if she was sick yet at this point, or if things were just all hunky-dory for Ted and Tracy while Robin is living her single life, and that's kind of the moment in time, the snapshot of the character that Sophie is interacting with now in that episode. And so you kind of have to do that mental math and craft that in your head to understand that at this moment for her, she's doing this advice giving and telling this story based off of Ted being like the one that got away type vibes, not the I ended up with the guy type vibes. It's not a bad scene. It just feels kind of out of place and forced in how the two actually come together. And I don't know. I think it could have been better executed, but I think that they were really trying hard to play off of the nostalgia of the original show and really pull in the audience that loved How I Met Your Mother and really give this sequel a shot. And while that one in particular felt forced in, the one that was really, really forced was Barney. And they even set this one up in an early episode as a teaser, and then later the story plays out. And basically, it goes something like this. Sophie is dating an older guy, and on a weekend at his second home that he can apparently afford because he's a chef, she thinks that she's having sex with her long-lost dad that she's never met. She jumps out a window, and as she's fleeing the scene, she rear-ends an SUV, and the man that steps out of said SUV is Barney Stinson. He is apparently in a stage of, I don't even know what to call this, womanizer addiction therapy, I guess, where if he says something sleazy, he gets shocked like a dog wearing a bark collar. I guess it was sort of funny, but it wasn't that funny. It really wasn't funny. Like at all. However, like Robin, he acts as a vehicle to get Sophie to tell him her story, gives her sage advice. This time, it's about how she should go and find her real dad. And that kicks off her going to try to find her real dad. Again, another thing that is very much akin to the character of Barney from the original show, where he has, unique experience. Like in both cases, it should have been really cool to see the old characters. And I guess in a certain way, it actually was. But it didn't feel like a very natural interaction or happenstance. And they were both used in literally the same way. Tell me your story so that I just happen to have completely perfectly aligned and relatable perspective from a story arc in the original show, and I can give you super great advice because I've been there before. All the while, us as the audience are supposed to feel all nostalgic about seeing those characters that we miss and reminisce on those storylines from the first show, and it kind of falls flat, to be honest. In my opinion, it falls flat. There were also some other random callbacks and cameos, and some of them honestly were really funny. Like Sandy Rivers, if you remember Sandy Rivers from How I Met Your Mother, he kept being shown on TV in progressively demoted positions. And in his report on the news or the weather or whatever he was doing in that moment, he was referencing his many, many, many piling up sexual allegation lawsuits from his various TV jobs. Like, That was the type of callback and the type of like, yeah, you did have to watch How I Met Your Mother to truly get that one. But if you did, that was pretty funny. They also brought back the captain and Becky, from Boats, who played a like tangential role or an adjacent role in getting Sophie a chance to see her like original date Ian again at some point in time. They went into GNB, the bank, for one episode and randomly ran into a couple of NSYNC members there. But that was the bank that Marshall and Barney worked for. So, there was familiarity within the show that was done that was done more subtly or even more creatively and humorous. And then there was other stuff that was like, getting a paddle to the face and here, let me drill a couple holes in it so that it picks up plenty of speed. So I guess like that leads me to the question that I must pose myself and answer myself is, what about the show as a whole? On its own, was it any good? Well, it was canceled after 2 seasons, so I will start by saying it didn't get the chance to really find out if it could be super good or not. But it was canceled after 2 seasons that did have progressive improvement, and I believe if I am correct and remembering this properly, part of the catalyst for the show being canceled was a writer strike that influenced it. So it wasn't, I don't know that it was necessarily 100% just like, this show's not good, we canceled it. I think there were other circumstances going into it as well. But was it a perfect show? Absolutely not. Season 1 was a bit of a clunky mess. It had some good parts in it, but it didn't feel very relatable, in my opinion. And I didn't feel like it was super believable. And by that, I mean, it didn't always really feel like the characters actually knew or liked each other. And yet they were supposed to be there. And I don't think they were necessarily supposed to feel like they've been together forever, because they sort of came together in the pilot, but then in other moments very quickly it was like, oh no, now they literally just do everything together and they're the best friends and they've known each other forever. And it's like, wait, which one is it? You know what I mean? I ask myself as I record into the wall. The outside of that, the writing was a bit bland in season 1. I didn't think the jokes were very punchy. I also didn't feel like the acting was as strong in season 1. It took me a little bit of time to engage with the show, because in the beginning, I felt like there was very much a your turn, my turn in the way that lines were actually being delivered. And it often didn't feel like these characters were having a natural conversation. And that's something that I never felt in the original show. And anytime you're doing a sequel, spinoff, remake, whatever, like you're always going to have that comparison in your mind. And we'll talk more about some of those comparisons as we go here. But like, it was a high bar to reach. And so the fact that there wasn't, that chemistry wasn't inherently tangible or noticeable in the beginning. And the setup of some of the relationships were kind of non-existent, especially the main will they, won't they characters of Jesse and Sophie. They meet because he's her Uber driver, taking her to meet her date that she met on Tinder. And for some reason, he and Sid, who's in the passenger seat, are just asking her all about this texting relationship she has with this guy that she's really into. Like all Uber rides do. That's exactly how Ubers go all the time. And when she gets out of the car, Sid just looks at Jesse and is like, oh my gosh, you're super into that girl, aren't you? And later, after the episode, does the whole like accidental phone swap thing, and the date doesn't work out for Sophie because he's leaving the country on a cliffhanger, I guess. Sophie and Val are like, hey, let's go hang out with those dudes from your Uber ride. They were cool. And now, like I mentioned, that's kind of the way that they come together, and they're this just whole ass friend group for the rest of the show and are just supposed to be immediately like intimately close, I guess. I don't know. It felt a little clunky, let's just say that. But season 2 actually started to work out some of the kinks, and it did feel like they were hitting a bit of a groove towards the middle of the season and through the like particularly up until like a certain point. Characters really did start to feel like they actually knew each other. They started to feel like they actually cared about each other. They'd actually been through some stuff together, so that it was making sense as to why they were always together. The writing started to get more intricate as well, at least in a sense that they were setting up some teasers and some stories, and it was starting to feel a little bit more like the original show did to kind of keep the stories as they were being told compelling. But it seems like they must have learned that they were at risk of getting canceled because they just kind of scrapped some of the teased storylines. One that jumps into my mind is a future Valentine's Day date that Sophie was supposed to have with the guy Ian, the original Tinder guy. They then shoehorned in some ways to fast track the Sophie Jesse getting together thing through this like love song that he wrote on the back of a receipt, and her getting super jealous about a new girl he starts dating. And they gave them this big kiss scene at the end of the season that could constitute as a natural ending of the whole story if they needed it to. They even tossed in a picture of Val and Charlie together with their child to basically give them the like, hey, they ended up together in the end too. And he apparently changed his mind. He wanted kids now because, hey, look, they have one. And that's sort of their way of tying a bow on everything. But they did at least leave the door open to a season 3 by not actually saying that Jesse was the father and causing a big riff in Sid and Hannah's marriage with her apparently cheating on him in LA. So if there was a season 3, they had an emotional cliffhanger to build from that was actually very, very similar. This whole thing, if you really break it down, really felt like the end of the season where Ted and Robin finally actually get together that first time, and he comes home and Lily had left Marshall. This was very similar in that Jesse and Sophie have this big kiss scene, and they're like getting together, and they're whatever, starting their happily ever after or whatever, but like they're going to walk back into the bar, and Sid and Hannah are, I don't know, are they heading for divorce? Are they, what is going to come of this fiasco that's happening? I get it, like from a writing perspective, if you think you might be canceled and you need a backup plan. I know if you watch any of the content that's come out about How I Met Your Mother that was actually researched and not some guy that just watched it 20 years later or whatever, but some of them talk about how the writers had put in like backup plans for the mother kind of in multiple seasons, where it's like, okay, if we don't make it past this, we have a way to tie the story up if we need to, even though like they're still driving towards the end that they ultimately gave us. It felt very much like that. Like this could wrap up the show if they cancel us, but we have something to build off of, and we don't end the story in case we actually get to continue writing this. So it was, I understood, I got it. At the same time, it felt a little rushed, as if they really did have an inkling like, oh yeah, we're done here. Or we're very likely done here, and we need to give her an ending that like with Jesse that suggests he is the father, even if we can't say that out loud. So yeah, that's kind of where they end things, and we'll, I guess, never know where it could have gone from there. So the next question that I pose to myself is, does it hold up to How I Met Your Mother? No, it certainly does not. While I found myself disappointed at the abrupt ending and not having a next season to watch, at no point did I think I was in the same like stratosphere of quality of a show as How I Met Your Mother. Which I don't actually knock it for. How I Met Your Mother is a really great show, in my opinion, and honestly had a fantastic cast to carry it, even when the story took a weird turn or felt like it was falling flat, or even if you hated the finale of the show, like, you still wouldn't argue that that cast didn't do a phenomenal job with the material that they had. How I Met Your Father had some recognizable guest stars in it, and having Hilary Duff from who, this generation that is likely watching the show would recognize from Lizzie McGuire for sure, plays Sophie, is obviously a name that somebody would know and someone that they would recognize. They had Josh from Drake and Josh, who was a recurring guest. The actress whose name I just apologize about not being able to properly pronounce, but she played Emily Prentice on Criminal Minds. She was Sophie's mom. Paget Brewster, is that actually how you say it? I guess Paget Brewster. Anyways, Paget Brewster, I believe, played Emily Prentice on Criminal Minds and was phenomenal in that particular role for when I watched that show. At least the parts of it that I have seen. Sophie's long-lost dad was played by Clark Gregg, who was Agent Coulson in a bunch of the Marvel stuff. And everyone else in the main cast, at least to me, was new. Maybe they'll go on to have great, amazing careers, but How I Met Your Mother, when you try to compare, like, they struck gold. Jason Segel, who played Marshall, was a movie star. Neil Patrick Harris, who played Barney, massive. Allison Hannigan, who played Lily, iconic for my generation. Kobe Smulders, who played Robin, was in Marvel as well. It was really just Josh Radnor, who played Ted, that didn't have a massive catalog of success that was bigger than How I Met Your Mother was. Again, I don't know that the jury is out on the cast of How I Met Your Father. Maybe they will do, some amazing things as their careers go. But that original cast was absolutely phenomenal, and how talented they were to elevate whatever material they were given. And trying to live up to that was going to be incredibly difficult, if not just completely impossible, even if the writing was actually as good as How I Met Your Mother was. And of course, it wasn't. I saw a YouTube video made that broke down a really interesting concept about the writing differences between the two shows, and it was on the Never Nothing channel, if you want to watch it. I think I mentioned it in my last episode when I talked about How I Met Your Mother, but it was really well done. The new How I Met Your Father show was not using the same people and was not written in the same way. So, I'm not going to steal the Never Nothing channel's work, but it basically broke down some of the clever writing styles and storytelling techniques that were used on the original How I Met Your Mother show that How I Met Your Father just didn't use, and was written in a much more just linear, straightforward, this happened, then this happened, then this happened way of delivering the story. And since they didn't use interesting ways to tell said story, you need the story to be really, really interesting to keep people engaged. And most of the time, it wasn't that interesting of a story being told. At least not when using How I Met Your Mother as a bar of success. Again, we're talking about, did it live up to How I Met Your Mother, which is one of the most successful sitcoms in history. So now that we've gotten the gist and gotten that out of the way, let's give away some silly made-up awards. Some good, some not so good. I like to call them Bingies. We're going to start with the I'm no Marshall Erickson, but I still make a hell of a comedic sidekick award for Best Main Character. And to me, Charlie is the best. He is pure comedic relief. He doesn't have a lot of clunkers. You know who the character is, why he's there, and he delivers on his role. You know, it's worth asking why the character does not go back home where he is super rich when Val breaks up with him. But it's great that he doesn't, because he's the most consistent character at bringing value to the show. Everyone else has kind of ups and downs and annoyances along the way, and I can't remember a single time that Charlie was on screen that I thought, I just wish he wasn't here. I'm not sure I could say that for any other character on this show. And that's not to say that the other characters suck. It's just that it's hard for a character on a show to almost never annoy me. Charlie is gold, and not just the golden spoon that he sells to pay for a nice place, but then immediately gets mugged of the cash that he just got. The next award we're going to do is the Will They, Won't They Make This Guy Make Sense award for the worst main character. Of course, I could go with one of the, bad random characters along the way, but that would be a cop-out. That is why I put the rules in place for myself to choose main characters to talk about and tear down, essentially. Sorry. But the worst main character, I think, is probably Jesse to me. He's supposed to be the everyman. He's the love interest. He's the one we're supposed to emotionally connect with. Yet, he's a musician that barely makes music, a teacher that barely teaches, a roommate that barely pays rent, the romantic that says I love you in his sleep on the first night, but is also anti-Valentine's Day and skeptical about love. He's honestly just not that endearing of a character. He's not all flaws. He's got some heart. He's got, the whole coping with going viral on the internet for a failed marriage proposal is actually really good. And then having him get steamrolled by his ex-girlfriend when they get back together makes you start to actually feel for the character and get emotionally invested in him. But also having that happen literally 10 minutes after his oops, I said I love you plot with Sophie just makes him look like a shitty potential partner for Sophie. It only took her walking downstairs and your ex-girlfriend is already at your door making out with you. I don't know. It's that sort of inconsistency with the character throughout the show that just makes him sort of meh for me. Everyone else has flaws and they leave things to be desired, but they feel like you at least get who they are, and you get who they are in the group and in the show. And they at least feel like they make sense as a character, whether you like who that character is or not. Jesse doesn't make a ton of sense to me. He doesn't feel like the same character, not just throughout the show, but sometimes even episode to episode or scene to scene. He sort of changes personality traits to fit the drama of the episode as the writing needs him to. And to me, that takes away from the connection of who the character is and why we should actually want him to end up being the father at the end of this show. That's just my 2 cents. The next award that we're going to do is the Poppy, that means daddy, right? Award for Best Joke. When Sophie thinks she might be sleeping with her dad. That one hits pretty hard. So to set the scene, set the stage for how this goes, she's been dating this older guy. I mentioned this episode earlier in the recap, but just fleshing it out a little bit. She's been dating this older guy, which is a completely rushed and weird relationship for her to get into, but it became funny because of how it ended. Sophie goes to stay with him at his second house. As I mentioned before, he's a chef, so apparently he can afford 2 houses in New York, I guess. And at some point during this romantic getaway, he says that he went to Lollapalooza the same year that Sophie's mom has always told her that she was conceived at Lollapalooza. Yeah. Did I mention that at any point in time? Sophie was conceived at Lollapalooza and doesn't know who her dad is at this point in the show. She obviously gets hung up on the idea that he could be her dad. And there are some kind of well-placed, quirky jokes in there where they have similarities that she never noticed before, but now she is. Like, they both like start laughing and they both snort in the same way. And he's like, ha, same snort. What are the odds? And she's like, very low, very low. And she's losing it. She thinks this dude is definitely, I got my snort from my dad. I've been sleeping with my dad. And then he goes and finds an old picture from that Lollapalooza concert, and Sophie's mom is cuddled up under his arm. And Sophie completely freaks out and leaves, jumps out the window, and this is where she rear-ends Barney, as I mentioned before. And while she does find out that he wasn't her father, he and her mom did apparently get to every base but home. And they share one final very, very cringy attempt at a kiss at the end of the episode before they both agree that they just can't stay together after he's been with, well, mother and daughter. In a show where you set up the mother of your main character as a promiscuous sex addict and someone who conceived a child at a concert and told her about it, this joke is written really, really well and lands even better than that. There aren't many times that I feel like I'm watching a show on the level of How I Met Your Mother, but this, within context of the show, definitely felt like one of them. The next award we're going to do is the, wait, I'm supposed to like you, right? Award for Worst Running Joke. And this one for me is the ongoing joke that Sophie is like a perpetual liar. That one kind of sucks. We're supposed to be invested in this woman finding her soulmate or whatever. That's kind of the premise, right? That means we should be rooting for her. We should like her. We should care. And she's just not the best character to root for. It's one thing to give her flaws. Her predecessor, Ted Mosby, had flaws. But he was a good dude most of the time, and most of his flaws were related to his pursuit of love and being hung up on Robin, or he did something in a specific relationship that was like, not great, or he was like, I don't know, a little like self-absorbed in terms of finding love, and he was, it was that kind of stuff that were his flaws. The flaws that they gave Sophie were like, she's super selfish and takes advantage of her friends, and she will manipulate people or just flat out lie to get what she wants. And these are the kind of flaws that are kind of hard to look past as an audience member that's trying to invest in you. I'm not rooting for her to find her person. What am I doing watching a show called How I Met Your Father if I'm not rooting for you finding the father? I might be alone in that. But it also might be that I'm not alone. And that played a role in the show's cancellation. The next award we're going to do is the If Three's a Crowd, What is Four? Award for Best Story Plot. And for this, I'm kind of going with a little, like a moment of the show. And it's Sophie's breakup with Drew. It's completely unwarranted, but the sequence is actually really funny when they commit to doing it. She kisses Jesse, goes over to break up with Drew the next day. She unexpectedly meets his parents and gets stuck with his mom, who she blurts out that she's there to dump her son. And then they get in an argument about who's actually going to be allowed to give him bad news that day, because his parents are there to tell him that his father's going to prison. And they play like rock, paper, scissors for who gets to deliver bad news. And ultimately, Sophie still breaks it off. And then later at the bar, there's this crazy 3-way merge scene that happens where Drew is wasted and coming to confront her. Jesse is coming to confront her as well, because this also comes after the premature I love you and the getting back with his ex-girlfriend. And in this moment, that guy Ian is back and she's talking to him at the bar. And so like they're all three converging on her at once. And the jokes in this are pretty punchy. It's pretty cringy, but like in the way that it's supposed to be. And it was a highlight for that season. The next award that we're going to do is the I Will Never Get This Time Back in My Life award for worst story plot. And this is the weird thing where Val's parents are always trying to set her up on dates and end up mad that she doesn't date or like marry a 20-year-old or whatever. That whole subplot is weird. And on top of that, how Sophie is so sexually attracted to them while also saying she's looked into them adopting her despite being a 30-year-old woman. Why would you be adopted by your friend's parents if you're also going to obsess over how hot they are and make reference that suggest maybe even wanting to sleep with them? Then they would be your parents, and that's even weirder. I don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know. Val's parents as a whole are maybe the worst part of this show in terms of storylines that are supposed to have some substance. They don't matter that much, but every time they do, it's weirdly uncomfortable, and not in a cute, funny way that the show is trying to make it. Honestly, all parents in this show are weird. Like, all of the older people in this show are written to be very, very sexual, which is a choice, I guess. And Val's parents are definitely no different. You know, while they can't keep their hands off of each other like they're some horny teenagers, they add in the layer that they're also obsessed with their daughter getting married to a man that can take care of her, and they're genuinely upset when she doesn't do it, even when it would be a horrible decision for her. It's a bad subplot. It never gets a resolution. I guess maybe you can infer that since she eventually has a kid with Charlie, that they would have probably been happy and then proud of her at some point. So maybe that would have been that makeup moment that we don't see. We never get there, and it wouldn't actually make up for what makes them bad. It would just be, finally she did the thing that they wanted, so now they actually love their daughter. So either way you slice it, they suck. The next award we're going to do is the Put Me In, Coach, I'm Ready to Play award for Best Side Character. And this one feels a little bit like a cop-out to me, but I'm going to do it anyways. And I'm going with Ellen. Technically, she's in the main cast, so she shouldn't be eligible for this award. But they treat her within the group as an extra. And they often cut her off and brush her off and forget she's there. And she doesn't get a ton to do. Ironically, until season 2, when the show actually starts getting good, and there aren't that many side characters to choose from in this show. The parents, as I mentioned, all suck. Sophie's dad is okay, but he's only there for a second. Drew is going to get his moment a little bit later. The ex-girlfriend for Jesse sucks. The Ian love interest sucks. Almost all of the love interests suck, actually. And that's basically all this show is. And that's why I also don't think that it holds up to How I Met Your Mother. Those characters experienced life together. These characters experienced dates together. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the show got better when they started giving Ellen more to do. She's a character that has comedy and heart. She's interesting. I don't like how they made her obsessive about her girlfriend going to Jersey so that they could break up, but she's ultimately a really strong character that spends most of the show on the sidelines, even though we could see her face a lot. So it's the best I got. The next award we're going to do is these jokes should be literally written for me, but why am I not laughing? Award for worst side character. And since I've already shit all over Val's parents, I'm going to shit on Sophie's mom. She really only gets one moment to be a real human and have some substance. And it's the line where she tells Sophie that she likes her bikini modeling poster so much because it was at the very beginning of her pregnancy, so it reminds her of Sophie. In every other way, she's useless for more than just a dirty joke. She's a great actress, and she honestly delivers on what she's asked to do. The inappropriate humor is actually good. I enjoy it. I just wish she had more to her. I like characters that have dimension. And again, aside from the one line that feels completely out of place based on everything else that we learn about her, she's one-dimensional and falls really flat because of it. The next award we're going to do is the If You Just Want to Taste and Not the Whole Thing award for Best Episode. And I think it was Disengagement Party in Season 2. And it's the one where Charlie and Ellen are fighting and nobody knows why. And then they finally say that it's because in the middle of the night, Charlie had walked up behind her to make a move, thinking that she was the new girl that he had been dating and had spending the night that night. And this leads to a story from Jesse about how he almost jumped in the shower with Sid at one point in time during them being roommates. And the experience was mutual because while Jesse was almost jumping in the shower, Sid thought that he was Hannah and he was preparing for her in, well, sex mode, essentially. And his solution is that what they did is all the cheesy, you must do these things in New York City that they found in a big, thick tourist book. And he has this line about like make so many new memories, it just like pushes the bad one down to basically the point you forget about it. And in Charlie and Ellen's haste to do that and accomplish that, Charlie completely neglects the new girl that he was with and she just leaves. At the very end, Jesse and Sid actually remember the incident and then they take the book and they rush out to make more new memories to forget again. It's not even the main plot of the episode, but it's just really good. It's the most memorably comedic story contained in a single episode that I can remember from the show. And so that would be the episode that I would watch if I were you. The final award that we are going to do is the he's kind of got done dirty, hasn't he? Award for Best Not the Father. As much as I find him bland, the answer is Drew. He's a decent dude. He's actually funny. And he doesn't do anything that warrants being dumped by Sophie in the first place. He just happens to be the guy she's with when the show decides that they're going to push the first will they, won't they with Jesse into the show. And now she's, got to break up with him because that's their through plot for the whole premise of this show, right? And sure, the one thing, like the way that they set this up is that he tells her that he thinks that she should get a real job because, she's 30. It's actually good advice. Get a real job while you continue to support pursue your passion and try to turn that into your real job. I don't know, like building a real career while hosting a podcast. Maybe this one hit home for me just a little bit. He has his cringe, like when he makes Jesse say something awkward to earn his job back or whatever. And he has his moments where his comedic chops really do shine through. Like when he got a spray tan and his overly white teeth. He absolutely rocks that scene. Is he the best character in the world? No. Is he the best potential father that she interacted with on the show? Yeah, probably was. All right. So that leads us to the final question, and that is, was this worth the binge? You can if you want. If you enjoyed How I Met Your Mother, you're at least going to enjoy the callbacks in this one. It's got some clunkers of episodes that you got to power through, but it's generally an enjoyable watch. I know I complained about it. It's not perfect, but it's really unfortunate that the show got canceled just as it was getting its footing. I don't think you'd actually be all that disappointed if you watched it, but you're not missing out on something legend. Wait for it. Dairy. I had to do it one last time just in case I don't find any other reason to make an episode about this universe. So there you go. Anyways, you can watch it. You'll probably enjoy parts. You'll probably not enjoy parts. And it's only 2 seasons, so it's not that big of a commitment. Anyways, if you enjoyed How I Met Your Mother, you might as well give it a shot and just see if there's anything in it that stands out. Yep. So that's all I got for you on How I Met Your Father. Thanks for being here. Follow at Belated Binge on social media, and make sure that you are following or subscribed on the podcast player that you're using right now or on YouTube so that you don't miss any of my future episodes. And now, go watch How I Met Your Father if you want.